Hi, my name's Eric Nathan. I'm the composer in residence at the New England Philharmonic, and we're here as part of our Listening In series, where we ask composers to speak a little bit more about their work and dive a little deeper into what makes it come alive. And we're here today with Vera Ivanova, who is a finalist for the Call for Scores competition, and we're very excited to have her here to speak about her work. So welcome, Vera.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's an honor to be here, and I'm very happy to have this interview. And I think the work that New England Philharmonic is doing for the new composers is very important, and there should be more of it throughout the country, I believe.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to for us and our audiences to get to learn more about you and your work now too. So a work that you had submitted that was a finalist was called Variations on Chords, and it's a very interesting title. And I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about what your concept behind the piece was. And this is a piece for orchestra.
Yes. So this is a piece which I composed a while ago, and I was very much under the influence of course, the composers such as Ligeti and Lutoslawski and Penderecki, and my thinking of writing pure music, non-programmatic music, was very abstract in a way. And I was thinking about, there are various types of variations, right? So the traditional ones, and then anything in the contemporary music could be subject of variation. And that was the main idea for the variations, to take chords and to really transform them to the point where they are still there, right, as a backbone of the music. But well, it all becomes about how much they can be changed and how much the theme of the variation can be changed to the point where it becomes almost unrecognizable and just serves as a sort of kind of a more or less a schematic guidance for the composer to freely explore the subject of the variation. So in a way, it sounds very structural, but it's both structural and variation on how to destroy the structure in the process of the composition, which is one of the things that happens naturally when I compose, whether I want it or not. I really, I have a perfect structure, and then quite often I cannot follow it and find a lot of beautiful things once I deviate from my own initial idea or structure. I don't know. I think many of us composers write this way. Maybe not. So, Eric, do you find yourself doing that sometimes in your own works?
Oh, and kind of finding the pieces on their own kind of sometimes show me where to go um, beyond my initial conception of it. Yeah. It's interesting thinking about a theme, a piece called Variations, because if we think of some famous works, I just heard an orchestra performance of Rachmaninoff's Variations on the theme of Paganini, where you have a very recognizable melody, and each time there's a variation, you hear how that melody is slightly transformed. In your piece, it's quite interesting in that we get a chord, but then I find it's very captivating how we're thrust into these almost very massive textures in these kind of different worlds. Though, how much or is it important for the audience to kind of know how the chords are being manipulated in this variation, or is it more of a compositional tool to create something emotionally or viscerally?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the short, direct answer is I don't think the audience needs or should worry about following all these transformations. And you mentioned Rachmaninoff, and it's one of my favorite works. I always quote it when I teach students about the form and variations and how much it changed in the 20th century. And he didn't even call it variations, right? He called it Rhapsody on a theme of Paganini. But he, very diligently write the number of each variation in the score. And of course, from the score, it's evident that it's so-called free variations. And we all know how the theme is transformed through inversion, and it's not recognizable. at all, and it sounds completely different, but there is a direct connection to that. And that's something I try to follow in my own way by changing those chords to the points where they're not recognizable, but there is still a connection in the compositional process to how I got there. So, and the main process that I used in this piece is going from vertical to horizontal and texturizing the chords to the point where the different parts of the chords would really develop freely through the voice leading and create their own new chords or sonorities, so harmonies. And my writing is for large ensembles at this point was more linear, and it was my own challenge to set up for myself to control better the vertical sonorities and the chords and the harmonies that result from the purely linear contrapuntal writing. And I was really influenced at the time by another not only Ligeti, but also Harrison Birtwistle, whose writing is very linear, and he has his own sort of method of that he describes as cantus and continuum, right? Where cantus is the evolving, constantly changing melodic line, and continuum is the time frame to which it spans, and how the cantus controls continuum, right? How the melodic line contains the time frame of the composition, and well, all the other elements of it, the meter, the rhythm. So even so, my piece is called Variation on Chords, but eventually all these chords become linearly represented and take a little bit over. And I have to say that it was one of the first pieces which I wrote for the orchestra, knowing exactly what I want to do, because some other student works that I wrote, well, you know, we all come to different forms in our life at different stages of our educational process, at our growth. And I think when I was doing my undergraduate degree and we had to write orchestral diploma, I think my aesthetic hasn't formed back then yet to understand how to write a big orchestral work. But with the variation of chords, at this point, I already felt like I know what I want to do for the orchestra. And of course, some of the things that I've done represent certain challenges, and maybe I wouldn't have done them now, but such as multiple divisi, which, of course, once you look at Ligeti's work, you think that this is very easy now for orchestras to do, but no, it's not, right? But still, to create this living texture, this complexity of this moving living texture without really using aleatoric method, I think it was worth to create some of this challenges for the orchestra, which can be overcome with some rehearsals. Sorry, and that was my class time, and in which I forgot to turn off. There are certain moments also. There is a section in the orchestral score where I really try to turn it into chamber orchestra, and there are several concertmeisters from each string section playing together with creating a quartet, and then it spans into a full texture for the full string orchestra. So I think it may be easier than multiple divises that I also have in this score, but that all works together as a concept, from multiple divisi to solos and back to the full string section. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in your piece, there's definitely this sense of you find moments of intimacy where it's just a few players or a family of instruments playing, and then they're in dialogue with more massive teaming textures of like as you say, the string section has been divided up into VCs into all these individual players or just groups of smaller divisions of the string section
Yes.
playing that.
And I really think very temporally about the orchestra. And sorry, and I believe that I think temporally, and I really like to explore with the woodwinds the multiplicity of lines that they can create, maybe being inspired by, again, Ligeti and Edison Denisev, Russian Soviet composer, who was in his turn inspired by Pierre Boulez, with whom they have an ongoing friendship. And Bert Wassel, of course, has those multiplicity of lines. And with strings, I really, really love the timbre of the strings. When I was actually taking music lessons when I was a child, I actually wanted to study violin, and I really have that ongoing love relationship with the violin. And the subtle textures, the harmonics is something I like to explore in orchestral and ensemble scores. And with the brass, I really feel like they've been underappreciated a little bit in contemporary music. And I may be wrong there, but I have an impression that while the woodwind strings are always included in medium-sized ensembles in chamber works, the brass is sort of because of the balance issues sometimes or availability, they're not as widely represented in contemporary music. And brass are amazing. They have both a lot of power and fragility, and the precision of the rhythm and intonation that they can create. It's so valuable for contemporary music. And of course, and percussion section, there is so much to explore in the percussion section. And yeah, I think the contemporary 21st century works and 20th century, they owe a lot to the expansion of the percussion section and what it created for contemporary music.
Yeah, well, in the orchestra, there's such a range of sound, and especially now when you can add in different instruments and percussion and write virtuosically for all the different sections. Also, with the instruments having developed from Beethoven's time, the brass instruments at that point could only play a few notes on the overtone series, and now they can do quite anything that you write for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I was interested in, and I know that you're a professor at Chapman University out in California, and you mentioned how teaching the Rachmaninoff Rhapsody to your students. And so I'm wondering, does teaching impact your composing, the ways you think about it being a composer, and vice versa, as a both a teacher and a composer?
Absolutely. So when I wrote variation of on chords, I wasn't teaching full time. So and now I have been teaching full time for years. And yes, I do find impact of the teaching on how I compose. I think since I mostly teach the chromatic harmony, 20th century theory, and instrumentation, um, uh, uh, you know, uh, I started in some of my compositions explore the concepts that I teach, and this is somewhat an uncontrollable process, but I guess because when I'm teaching, I find so many great examples of compositions using, for example, how the sets can be transformed in music, right? Or how different modes can be used effectively. That in my choral work, for example, that I wrote recently, A Thirst for Water, which was premiered by Pasadena Chorale. I actually started with going through all the modes and creating some of my own scales before I actually got to writing the composition. And of course, I ended the work with the leading scale, which I had a pleasure to explain to the choir, because it's it's a community choir, and there are a lot of wonderful singers. Some have music education, some don't, and I found that having that experience of teaching different modes and skills really helped me to deliver the idea and explain why it ends with the tetrachord from the leading mode, and how it's actually naturally coming from the overtone scale. If you look at the overtone scale, so it's as natural as major, because at first for part of the choir, it was a little bit difficult to get that sharp fourth scale degree. But after they saw how well it's actually, it's somewhat could be perceived as a variant of major scale coming from the overtone series, right? So it's a part of the tonal word in a way, if one presents it this way, right? It was easier for them to actually get this latent scale. And just the process of the composition also has changed since I constantly teach some of the advanced music theory topics, orchestration topics, and just looking through the materials and finding new exciting examples also feeds my compositional process as well. And at the same time, I guess because I'm a little bit more mature and see how little time big ensembles have to rehearse new works, my process has changed in a way that instead of writing very difficult, challenging, virtuosic parts for individual players or sections, I'm more and more writing in a very layered way, where the same complexity or almost the same complexity can be achieved between different parts that can still, follow the more or less standard rhythmic grid, but between the parts, these polyrhythm or this syncopated in a more complex way, rhythm can be created, or this kind of more difficult line can be created as a combined line, right, or compound melody rather than giving it all to the same player. But I think many composers come to this unless a part of their aesthetic is to be in the realm of the new complexity or inheriting the ideas of new complexity. Just out of practical reasons, and seeing how less and less time is given to ensembles to actually prepare the piece. Which, of course, for us composers, maybe, well, a sad truth, but this is also a nice challenge to deal with, to figure out how you can write the same level of complexity in your own score without overburdening the performers. And I believe that they only can be grateful when they see a well-planned, well-thought-through part, right, that does not make them stretch to their limit and spend all their time on practicing that one bar, right? When they have tablet against tablet and on the offbeat something else, right?
Well,
And
it's
I still keep the same complexity of work for individual players in solo and chamber music, right? And that's also, especially when I'm writing those virtuosic pieces for the individual performers who want to showcase their virtuosity, and they're ready to spend months and months preparing the piece. But for the large ensembles, yeah, I took that now layered approach into distributing the complex sonority sounds, rhythms between the players in a more or less or close to being idiomatic way, and when they all sound together, they create that more complex texture.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely the challenges of rehearsal time with an orchestra. It has to, just how many rehearsals all these people, the 60 to 80 people that are there in one room together can be there, and the amount of time they have to work on the new piece. But I think it's true about thinking about if you want your music to be complex, and thinking of the word complex versus complicated, but also simple, like having simplicity in the music, maybe be instead of it being simple. And so there's a beauty in both the complexity and simplicity of art. And
Exactly.
so
And I also did think of the word complex as like another meaning as being compound, right? And consisting of several things combined together, right? So
true.
that's my approach. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder how the work you've been working on the last year or two, how that has evolved from this piece variations and how you where you are to your current projects at the moment.
So I just completed several pieces, and so for the past few years, I've been writing for choir, and that also has been a challenge in a way for me to find the way to write simply, but still without changing the aesthetics completely. And I think I found that way through what I mentioned as kind of a scales derived from modes or the partial use of modes combined with scales and also layered, again, layered texture, lots of texture. And the few recent pieces that I composed are actually for youth orchestras and ensembles. So I wrote a piece for one of the Yola orchestras, which will be performed in the spring. And I wrote a piece for string orchestra and solo piano for our own Chapin University orchestra camp, which will be performed in October by middle school students who will just get together ad hoc and rehearse and perform it. It's a short piece. And I wrote a piece for wind band and in the plans, I actually now this year I'm writing for more chamber music. I wrote a piece for flute solo, which is very complex, and it took several meetings for the flutist and me to get through the piece actually, and will probably take several months to learn it. But the flutist Michael Matsuno is very happy about that challenge because it is really gonna showcase everything he can do on flute. So the complexity is still part of my life, but I find also some ways of writing for choirs, even for community choirs, for community ensembles and bands, and focusing more on more interesting harmonic and melodic successions rather than the complex textures per se. And my goal there is to sort of without changing completely aesthetic, to still find the balance between what the community ensembles are open to play aesthetically and technically, and still having something that will ignite their interest even further to contemporary music. Without turning them away from contemporary music. And it's a challenge of its own, but I really enjoy that challenge, that new kind of a challenge in my life, how to write simply yet without compromising the aesthetic of the new music that I love so much. And of course, it's like a very large what is aesthetic of new music. There is a multiplicity of aesthetics, right? And of course, right and simple diatonic music is one of the aesthetics of the new music, right?
Well, it seems like approaching writing the music for students to play in community groups, that there's an element of teaching in that too, and that like you might have a intro theory class where there are some students that are just starting at the beginning and you need to um, keep them along with the class. There might be some more advanced students in that class, and there's always a balance of how do you give the material, but you want to also give them something exciting to think about what this topic could lead you to in some way.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was talking with one of the publishers and showing my piece for youth orchestra, and it's called 18 Degrees Below the Horizon. And when I was writing this piece, I was thinking about the moment at night, right before the sun rises, and when it's still dark, but you can see a little bit of the glow in the sky. And apparently, technically, there are different ways of measuring when the sun rises. And the earliest in terms of timing is when the sun is still below the horizon at 18 degrees. And it was interesting how the publisher was saying, oh, that could be interesting for schools because they can also incorporate some of the studies about astronomy, right, and all the other topics that are outside of music. And it sounded a little bit surprising to me because I didn't think about that. But yes, it's there. It's a part of the piece. And in the piece for the string use orchestra and piano, I really have like a little bit more advanced piano part, which uses a lot of polychords, and it's kind of very virtuosic, while the strings part is a little bit easier because it was supposed to be for the grade 2, and I think it's about 2.5 in reality. So yeah, and of course, this is also like an opportunity to teach some of the advanced theory concepts such as polychords, polytonality, and there are all kind of scales that I also use, which are semi-chromatic but not entirely. And it's called Midsummer Rain, and I am in California, and one of the directors was saying, "Oh, yeah, we don't have rains in California, but this summer we did. We don't have rains in California in the summer, but surprisingly, this summer we did." So it's also one of those, unfortunately, moments of changing climate, I believe, right? So it's going on.
It's so interesting and beautiful to hear how you pour your whole world into your music, whether it's the environment that you're in or and you're teaching, and way you help other composers and students through the field. And it's been really wonderful having a chance to speak with you, and look forward to hearing these new works come to
And
life.
thank you so much, Eric, for inviting me in. And I think what you do is very important. And it's also great for young composers to see that there are opportunities out there for the work to be read, for their music to be heard
Mm.
by large orchestras.
Yeah, I think it's a great need in the field to have more opportunities with orchestra for to
Absolutely.
be heard, read through.